You can go ahead, Pam.
Centering thoughts. Okay. Hi, my name is Pamela Marr. I'm the board liaison to the Social Responsibility, Music, and Worship Committees. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a religious community who commit ourselves to diversity. We hope to nourish human differences, those of gender, race, age, ability, sexual orientation, political views, culture, class, and religious belief. Welcome to all who treasure freedom of conscience in the search for truth. We promise to do our best to provide you a spiritual home. We extend a special welcome to our visitors today. We hope you will follow our UUC Facebook page and stay tuned for our events such as Wonderful Wednesdays and Sunday morning meditations. There are religious exploration classes for adults and small groups for support and interests like book club. Also, families can follow our UUC Religious Education Facebook page. There are religious exploration classes for 4K through 9th grade and youth group every Wednesday online for middle school and high school. We are so glad you joined us today.
Good morning. I am Karen Hirsch, serving this morning as worship associate. Thank you for joining our online services today. Our opening words are by Rebecca Solnit. It had come to me not in a sudden epiphany, but with a gradual sureness, a sense of meaning, like a sense of place. When you give yourself to places, they give you yourself back. The more one comes to know them, the more one seeds them with the invisible crop of memories and associations that will be waiting for you when you come back. While new places offer up new thoughts, new possibilities. Exploring the world is one of the best ways of exploring the mind, and walking travels both terrains.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Anderson. Talk with you about some big volunteer opportunities that are coming up pretty soon. During the first 2 weekends in August, our Social Responsibility Committee and the Board of Directors are putting on or are working at the Brat stand at Festival Foods on London Road. This will be a big fundraiser and can help us with just doing the business of our congregation, as well as supporting different organizations that we sponsor, such as the Beacon House and Bolton Refuge House. If you have ever worked in fast food in your life or ever wanted to, this is your big opportunity to try things again. We will need grillers, we need people to handle money, people to wrap food, and people to generally do some chores at the Brat stands. On Fridays, on both Fridays over the noon hour, we are teaming up with the health department so that we will be giving a brat for a shot for anybody that gets COVID vaccines during that time. So this is a big chance to do some community service too. In order to sign up, what you do is tomorrow the UU Connections will be coming out by email, and there are some slots to sign up right on there. If you want to work, for example, Friday, and it looks like the slots are filled, we actually do have some extra work for you to do and things like that, and we'd be happy to have you sign on. So if things are filled up, contact Nate, Otto, or me, and we can make sure that you get on the schedule. We've had a lot of people do a lot of background work on this, so we hope that you'll be able to step in and help out with all of the other necessary work that's coming on. The other thing is that we are this close now to having the 30 people that we need to sign up so that we can run the UUC's first ever blood drive at our congregation. The Red Cross wants us to have 30 people that are interested in donating blood. It doesn't mean that you're definitely signing your life away, but you're interested in donating blood. And if we can do that, then we can move the target, or bring the target closer, and the Red Cross will work with us to set things up better. If you are 17 and older and you're in fairly good health, even if you're taking most common medications, that isn't a problem for you to be a blood donor. So please sign up when the UU Connections comes out tomorrow. And I think I've covered all my topics. So please look at the UU Connections tomorrow and see if you can sign up. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Linda Mays, and please join me as we light the chalice this morning. And I'll be reading the words written by Josh Prudence and Percival Roburn.
I got no sound.
Family written, the words were written by a family in honor of their mother's UU ordination. We all are flames. When we gather hand in hand, our church, our community, our home, we inspire, we celebrate, we come together sharing our light of hope for our shared future.
This is a reading. Castles in the Air by Henry David Thoreau. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them.
Now is the time in our service when we share our joys and concerns. You may share your joys and concerns in the chat column, and I will share them aloud in the circle of this community of care. We will have a moment of silence as you share your joys and concerns. Harriet Jardine says, it's good to be here visiting with you, Macon's High Street Church, UU Church. Linda McDowell says, agreed. I'm happy to be visiting with my son and his wife. It's nice to have you folks with us today. Marcia says, my son and daughter-in-law attended the parent coffee time for RE yesterday. Our daughter attended it too, and she said she met your family. This is Prof Goff, is that right? I am Arlen Goff from High Street Church. This week we lost Jenny Johns to cancer. In addition, I lost a former coworker, Tanya Colquitt, after 2 years in a long-term facility following a stroke. And we're very sorry to hear that, Arlen. It's a hard thing. I will light a candle to honor all the joys and concerns shared today. And let us end our joys and concerns with the words by James Vila Blake. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. Just trying to find my way around my screen here. I am going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint that I would like to include. This morning, we're going to examine some Unitarian Universalist neighborhood stories as a way to seek our UU soul. And in my view, and I think many others, stories are really at the heart of who we are, and it is where we find meaning. What a soul is a difficult and complex and interesting question. But for me, I certainly think that stories are an essential ingredient in it. And as part of this exploration, we're going to look at places where we have met, things we have done, both in recent past, but also going back more than 100 years here in the Chippewa Valley to the first Universalists and also the first Unitarians in the Chippewa Valley. And then more recently, how our own congregation was formed and out of the Chippewa Valley Fellowship. Now, in the blurb that we published for this program, I included Michael Servetus because certainly the soul of Unitarian Universalism at least goes back to Michael Servetus. But next Sunday, if you are interested more deeply in this topic, Reverend Laura Smidzik at the Michael Servetus Unitarian Universalist Society in Fridley, Minnesota, just north of Minneapolis, is going to do her entire program on religious freedom and radical thinkers, early European Unitarians. And Michael Servetus, I know, is going to be one of the featured people. Now, I am not too disappointed that I don't get to include Michael Servetus very much in my conversation, because I'm not sure I would want to spend too much time with Michael Servetus. He was a great theologian. He challenged the Trinity and in fact wrote several books challenging the notion of the Trinity, saying that there was no biblical evidence that there were three persons in one God. He was also a very courageous explorer of the human psyche, investigating circulatory system and other features of the human body. But as I say, he will not be a major part of our conversation. He died a long time ago, burned at the stake by John Calvin. And another Unitarian from the same period is King John Sigismund, a king of Transylvania, who was as a king, made religious tolerance and freedom a public principle. But we are not going to spend much time on King John. In fact, here he goes. And another, maybe it's just the nature of this kind of artwork, but he also doesn't look like someone I would like to spend a lot of time with. I'm instead going to go now to 1970. 1970 was the year that Karen and I and our two small children began to go to the Unitarian, at that time, yes, no, it was already the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Eau Claire. Alan and Lou Curtis persuaded us, and we lived only about 6 houses away from the Lutheran Campus Ministry where they met. So in 1970, in June of 1970, we took our newborn daughter, Stephanie, and our son, David, 2 years old, to the Lutheran Campus Ministry. And here it is. It is still a house. At that time, it was directly across the street from the campus school on Park Avenue. Now it's across the street from the new building, the Centennial Hall, on the University of Wisconsin campus. The adults, there were maybe 6 or 7 of us, met in this room here around a big table and had coffee and talked. And the children had religious education classes in other parts of the building. Although religious education may be an exaggeration, some of the topics were bicycle repair, and they made films, and they studied plants. There were no services. There was no ritual. Those are things that we were really afraid of at that time, I'm sorry to say. However, jumping back 110 years before that, 112 years before that, there was a Universalist congregation in Eau Claire. It was organized first by a woman, Lorenda Wilkins. She had 2 small children. Her husband was working in a logging camp north of Eau Claire, about 100 miles. And she was left alone through the winter of 1957-58. And she felt very lonely and isolated, and she sent notes to all of her friends and asking that they form a Universalist congregation. And so in 1858, they did. And shortly after, this is the way Eau Claire, this is already, not already, this is somebody else's building castles in the air, because although it shows a lot, this grid of streets, these streets didn't all exist. This was just somebody's fantasy about the way it should look in 1860. You notice that it is Eau Claire City on the west side and Eau Claire Village on the east side. The city was the largest part of what is now Eau Claire, because the only way to get to Eau Claire basically was to come up the river and to the docks here on Water Street. this was the heart of the Eau Claire in 1860 because of access by the riverboat. There were, you see, this is this line is a proposed railroad track, but that was never built. And in fact, the railroad tracks were eventually built up here, which meant that North Eau Claire also became a prominent part of the city. This was the only bridge, and it was actually not in existence in 1858 when Lorenda started the congregation. Lorenda lived right under this L here on Farwell Street, and eventually our own congregation, our church right now is right here. So this is a map of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Now you see that when we moved our congregation to downtown Eau Claire, we had a committee. It was headed by a math teacher, and he took the address of every member family, every family in the congregation. There were probably about 20 at the time, 15 to 20 members, families. And he did a grid to see where the least distance would be for there were some who lived in the north, there were some who lived in here, and he calculated that the place where we should meet should be right here somewhere. Eventually, actually, we moved over here, but you can see that even by his mathematical computations, the travel time to our meeting place was a good choice. However, the church that we bought from moved out of Eau Claire or out of this downtown area of Eau Claire, because this happened. London Square Mall had been built, and the stores downtown were moving out. The interstate had been built, and not too long after that, Oakwood Mall was built, and there was a sense that the downtown was decaying and dying and would never become resurrected again. Right now, this is right on the S in South Farwell is our current church. The first Universalist church, I'm going to show you in a second, was right here on the T in Barstow. And this is it. Now you notice that this is where the first Universalists met in 1860. This photo was taken a lot longer after that because you can see some electrical wires up here. So by the time this photo was taken, this building had already been transformed into storage. But at the time the Universalists purchased it, it had most recently been a schoolhouse. By the time this photo was taken, you can also see here the chancel of the Christ Church Cathedral, earlier version. So we can guess that this is before the current church, the Christ Church Cathedral was built, but after electrical lights were brought into the area. The minister, the Universalists hired a minister, Joseph Barrett. He was a school teacher, but he was also a Universalist minister. He was a rabid abolitionist, and it was a challenge for the Universalists because he was prone to get into fistfights with anyone who disagreed with him about the prospects for union abolition and the union involvement in the war. He eventually wrote a book about the eagle Old Abe. This is a picture of Old Abe as a juvenile eagle. Just before they left Eau Claire to join the Union forces in Madison, and then eventually in many battlefields throughout the Civil War theater. Barrett happened to get rich on this book, and so he didn't go back to being a Universalist minister or a teacher, because he now was able to make a living as a writer and a speaker. I'm showing you this photo of another important woman in the Chippewa Valley. This is Bertha Tainter. Bertha Tainter is significant to our story about the Universalists in Eau Claire, because she was well acquainted with the people in Eau Claire. She was from Menominee. Bertha came to Eau Claire when she was about 39 years old in 1867, probably. And she came to Eau Claire to speak at the Universalist congregation in Eau Claire on the topic of the Freedmen's Bureau. Maybe you remember from your history that the Freedmen's Bureau was very involved in trying to help former slaves, and actually some poor whites as well, after the Civil War in the South, for healthcare, education. They helped former slaves learn about labor contracts and how to get a wage for their work. The Freedmen's Bureau helped to organize legal marriages for former slaves that had not been legally married before that, and helped find lost relatives and so on. They also found schools, and in fact, say Howard University was founded as part of the Freedmen's Bureau. However, when Lincoln was assassinated and Johnson took over as president, he wanted to abandon the Freedmen's Bureau, and Bertha was very involved in promoting the continuation of the Freedmen's Bureau. And so she came to Eau Claire to speak at the Universalist congregation. However, she was pregnant. She was about 6 months pregnant with twins. So she was quite conspicuously pregnant. The newspapers did not they just summarized in one sentence the topic that she was speaking on, but they spent a lot of print addressing the fact that this woman who was conspicuously present was speaking in public. Bertha Tainter is also important in the history of Unitarians and Universalists in the Chippewa Valley through the Mabel Tainter Memorial in Menominee. This is Bertha's story kind of in a nutshell. She was born Bertha Lucas, but she married at the age of 19 a Methodist minister whose name was Lejeune, and they had 2 children. And Reverend Lejeune took up with Bertha's younger brother and left Bertha alone with those 2 children, and she and her younger brother, or Mr. Reverend Lejeune and Bertha's younger brother, went to California and never were heard from again. So she was left with 2 children, and she had been a school teacher, but she was trying to make a living by doing needlework, and she married Andrew Tainter. So at that time, Andrew Tainter was a kind of a starting lumberman. He was not yet rich, but he eventually became the richest man in Wisconsin. And So she found herself with considerable financial resources. This is Mabel Tainter, who was one of the twins who Bertha was pregnant with when she came to Eau Claire to speak. The other twin died in childbirth, and one of the Menominee papers thought that was God's retribution for Bertha going around speaking. This girl is Mabel's older sister who died of diphtheria when she was 10 years old. And so Mabel Tainter is important to our story, to the soul of our story here in the Chippewa Valley, because she died at the age of 19, shortly after this photograph was taken. She died of a ruptured appendix, and her family, this is Bertha Tainter at about the age when Mabel was 19. She and her brother, her brother who did not go to California, and she started a Unitarian congregation in Menominee, Wisconsin, and they hired Henry Doty Maxson. Henry Doty Maxson gave as his hiring sermon a sermon called the Religious Possibilities of Agnosticism. So Henry Doty Maxson was a Unitarian minister, but he was also a humanist, a friend of Jenkin Lloyd Jones and of other humanist Unitarian ministers in the region. Henry Doty Maxson also eventually became a leader in the Western Conference of Unitarians. This is a portrait of him. Shortly, actually, before this building was built, this is the Mabel Tainter Memorial in the Chippewa Valley. It was built as a Unitarian church and community center. If you go in the front door right here, just inside the front door, across the hallway, across the lobby, is a bronze plaque that says Permanent Church Home of the Unitarian Society of Menominee. Reverend Maxson had his office up here, and it still is there. If you go to visit the Mabel Tainter Memorial, stop up and see Henry Doty Maxson's office. So many people, even regular visitors to the Mabel Tainter for theater or concerts or other things like that, are not aware that it was actually built as a Unitarian church in 1889. This is a view of the sanctuary, I guess, or the theater part of it. It was designed to serve the full circle of life, that is, the intellectual, the moral, the spiritual, the musical, and it was certainly a part of that humanist tradition. Now we go back to Eau Claire. A friend of Bertha Tainter's, Dora Rust, also a wealthy woman whose husband had made a fortune in the lumber industry and then died. Dora Rust was the widow of a rich lumber person and a formidable woman. She decided that there needed to be a Unitarian church in Eau Claire. And she donated the land and most of the funds that made it possible to build the first Unitarian church in Eau Claire, and I'll show it to you, and you'll see if you recognize it. There it is. Many of you know, of course, but those of you who might not, let's see if you recognize where that building is, because it still stands, it still exists, and here it is. Actually, if you stood at the front door of our existing church, you maybe couldn't spit all the way across the street to this building, but you could certainly throw a stone. It is kitty corner from our existing building. And this is on older maps called Unitarian. If we go back to the earlier photo, you can see that it's much modified. This space up here in the original building was a small apartment for a visiting minister, and also a balcony with pews overlooking the sanctuary. And guess who the minister was for this church? There's another shot of the church. You notice that the steps here, the exterior steps were enclosed in the new building. This person, Henry Doty Maxson, served the Menominee Unitarian congregation as well as the Eau Claire congregation. He did the service in Menominee in the morning and then came to Eau Claire in the afternoon and evening, spent the night most of the time in that apartment above the church, but sometimes in the old Eau Claire hotel, because the owner of the hotel was a Unitarian and a member of this congregation. Unfortunately, well, I'll tell you in a second. This is the interior of his office in the Mabel Tainter Memorial on the second floor in the tower on the west side, the southwest side. You can visit this. This is the way it still looks today with the books that he had in his bookshelf. He died in, I'm sorry to tell you, in 1891, just 2 years after the Mabel Tainter and the Unitarian Universalist or Unity Unitarian in Eau Claire were constructed. And after that, well, this is what he was teaching Sunday school in Eau Claire the day he died. And this was his message that he wrote on the board in the basement of the church that we just looked at. He who has caused no fear to the smallest creature has no cause to fear when he dies. Unfortunately, after Henry Doty Maxson died, the Unitarians survived in that congregation for only 12 years because Dora Rust, who had given all the money to build it as well as the land, had traveled to Chicago to hear Mary Baker Eddy. Oh, this is the interior of the church when it belonged to the Christian Scientists. The Christian Scientists bought it in 1903 and had it until very recently. Although this says the present, that's not accurate. Christ Church Cathedral owns it now, and right now it is empty. Most recently, it had been used by a Mennonite congregation, and even after that, as a warming shelter for a winter shelter for the homeless shelter down the street. So right now, it's empty, and probably you could buy it for about $200,000. But this is the inside of it when it belonged to the Christian Scientists. It has a fireplace in the back and upstairs, and the kitchenette or apartment that for the minister which is now closed off. But Dora Rust and Bertha Tainter had gone to Chicago to hear Mary Baker Eddy. They went down on the train. They went to the World's Fair, World's Exposition in Chicago, and they heard Mary Baker Eddy. And Dora Rust was more persuaded than Bertha Tainter. And so she became a Christian Scientist. And because she had the essential power over that building and its property, she basically gave it to the Christian Science congregation, who met there for many, many years. This is another picture. And incidentally, right across the street, there was another church being built. The Methodist Episcopal built their church, and they started in 1911 and finished in 1913. And we'll tell you more about that in a little bit. For a long time, from the time 1903 until 1952, the Unitarians and the Universalists in Eau Claire had faded away and were not active. Then the Unitarian Society, I don't remember the name, but the National Unitarian Association decided that they would try to send a kind of missionary to the Western states. And they chose Monroe Husbands, who became a kind of missionary, and he traveled all around Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, and he started fellowships, they called them. He would put an ad in the paper, as he did here in Eau Claire, that said, if you are interested in a liberal religion, come to meet on Saturday night at such and such a place. And that happened here in Eau Claire. And the result was that in 1952, the Chippewa Valley Unitarian Fellowship started. It was not yet the Unitarian Universalist because the merger didn't take place for another 10 years. And this is a picture of Monroe Husbands. He started, I think, many congregations. If you travel around Wisconsin or Minnesota and Iowa, they will say that the beginning of their congregations was a fellowship started by Monroe Husbands. And this takes us back again to when Karen and I became Unitarian Universalists in 1970. There were a number of Unitarians who were part of the Unitarian Fellowship, the Chippewa Valley Unitarian Fellowship, which really had its center in Chippewa Falls or Bloomer, north of Eau Claire, rather than in Eau Claire itself. And they were mostly elderly people. By elderly, I mean, like 10 years younger than I am right now. They did not have children who needed religious education. There were some in Eau Claire who did have children and wanted to have religious education. The Chippewa Valley Fellowship met on Saturday nights or sometimes Sunday afternoons, and the people in Eau Claire decided that they would have a religious education program here in Eau Claire. And so this is where we met originally. And I would say that there were more children in this fellowship than adults. You can see here that our annual expenditures were $745. The contributions were $40 per family, and our rent at the Lutheran Campus Ministry was $200 a year. Well, this was the first year, 1970 to the spring of 71, that Karen and I went the first year to the Lutheran Campus Ministry, and then we moved to the UW Eau Claire Ecumenical Religious Center. It was at that time owned by Baptists, the Catholics, and a Lutheran congregation, or Methodist congregation, excuse me. And this is the way it looks now, but it was only the house part of this facility. I want you to see this document because, okay, this is 1972 or maybe 1973, not for sure, we don't know. But you see here are two groups, the Eau Claire group and the Chippewa group. Well, the Chippewa group met in Chippewa Falls, sometimes in Bloomer. In this case, they were meeting at the Rutledge Building in Chippewa Falls. And you see here the officers, Bobby Witt, who was married to George Witt, Emma Swenson, who was married to Olin Swenson, Dick Mock, or VP Mock, Barb Holbrook was one who was active in both the Eau Claire group and the Chippewa group. And there were others too. Brian and Mildred Larson and Cal and Eloise Eland were active in both groups. But mostly we met separately. So for example, here you have Karen Peters, Mildred Larson, Barb Holbrook, responsible for religious education. And I want you to notice that there were 20 teenagers. There were 20 kids ages kindergarten through 5th grade. There were 7 or 8 preschool kids. There were maybe 40 or 50 young people. And so religious education was in why the Eau Claire group was formed and why we met. Whereas the Chippewa group, they were interested in political issues. They were passing resolutions all the time that were mostly political in nature. But again, you see that our total budget was $695. This is another picture of the Ecumenical Religious Center. This is the part of the building that we met in. This part over here to the left is the new part of the building. And when they started construction on this new part of the building, we were evicted. We weren't evicted. We couldn't meet there anymore. But also maybe you noticed that on that document about meeting at the Ecumenical Religious Center, we met there fairly early in the morning because we needed to be out of the building by 10:30 because the Quakers met there after us. They also shared the building, and the Quakers complained quite regularly that the Unitarians were way too noisy long after the period of time when they were supposed to have left the building. And of course, the Quaker tradition is much more quiet. This is a photo from 1972 in the Ecumenical Religious Center. And here we have Karen Hirsch reading to Søren Larson, Alistair Chan, David Hirsch, and Stephanie Hirsch, and somebody who we don't know for sure who this is, but it was probably Stephanie Brown. After we left the Ecumenical Religious Center from 1973 to 1975, we went to the town of Washington. This is what it looks like right now. It is now Hanson's Corner Store. Before it was the town of Washington Hall, it had been a school building. And it still exists, but of course, in a different form. This is an important part of our history, however, because it is in this building where we added ritual, we added music, we added a regular program to our adult services. So we began to have speakers and topics, and every time we got together, we sang the doxology, "From all that dwell below the skies," every single time. And we sang, did a reading. Love is this, no, we didn't do that one yet, but we, let's see, look to this day, for it is life, the very breath of life, in each brief course, and so on. We added these ritual elements, and also we developed some programming for rites of passage, for weddings and funerals and memorials and passages of other kinds. So this is an important building in our history because it transformed us from being just the adults, from being just a discussion group to being a, I would say, religious organization. And after we left the town hall, we moved to the King's Daughters Hall on Illinois Street in Shawtown. The King's Daughters was a sorority, I guess you would call it, whose motto was "Look up, not down, look forward, not back, look out, not in, lend a hand." And this is the way that building looks. Is now the Evangelical Baptist Church of Eau Claire. They are still meeting there, as far as I know. It was one little room a fairly big room upstairs, and one fairly big room downstairs, with a little kitchen in one corner of the basement and a bathroom. It, as you can see, served us pretty well, but we here we developed more programming and grew our congregation until in 1981, we decided we needed to have a larger space. And I don't recall exactly how it came up, but the Emmanuel Lutheran congregation was selling its building downtown and creating a new church on Gulf Road, where they are still meeting right now. They had, they were asking $150,000 for this building. This is the way it looked in 1913 when it was new. You notice the stained glass windows, the chandeliers, the curved pews, the altar rail, the organ. All these things were still there when we purchased the building in 1981. We bought that building for $41,000. The congregation, the Lutherans had another offer for the building. Many of you know the story. It was a pizza chain who specialized in Dracula themes, and they loved this old church building because there was an organ that could be used to play weird music. And they had made an offer to the Lutherans declined it. It would have been much more profitable for them, but we made our offer of $41,000 and we bought this building. It is, by the way, and on the net right now, on the National Register of Historic Places. It's also on the Wisconsin State Register of Historic Places. Is an example of a, what is it called? Neo-Gothic revival style. And you can see how ridiculous it was for us to be buying a building in 1881 because this is our budget, $8,250. We had $554 in hand in our bank account. And this, for many years, we were not able to pay our mortgage. We were sometimes able to pay our utility bills, but usually not. So for a long time, it was quite a struggle to meet in this building financially. There were 20 adult members at that time. And now I think we have 260. And for a while, we were entirely lay-led. And in 1986, we heard that a Unitarian Universalist minister, fresh out of the seminary, had married a Methodist minister who was going to be stationed in Jim Falls. And we had her, we were able to persuade her to come and be our first minister. And this is Marianne. And Marianne eventually became a Methodist minister herself and is now retired. And we hope maybe she'll come back and do a program for us. Okay, this is our church home now. It's the heart and soul of our congregation in many ways, but I'm going to skip over these to show you one enterprise. We tore out the organ. That's another interesting story, but here is our crew tearing out the organ, and this is the way it looked after the organ was gone. But we also made, and not only took things out, we added things. This is Laurie Bieze, the artist, who made this beautiful window for us that she called "Out of the Universe We Come." And we have also been blessed in our congregation with the soul of other ministers, and this is Julianne Lepp, and our office manager, and Virginia Wolf, our minister emeritus, and other music leaders who we think are very much part of the soul of our congregation, and other leaders like the members of the board, but most of all of you, each one of you who is a member of this congregation or even visit once in a while. This is really the soul of our congregation. And so this is a window that Laurie Bieze made with fifth graders back in 1986. And it is in our steeple, or will be again soon. We've had it out for repair. It suggests that we sustain and keep the fire of commitment until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. It is now time for giving. The 50-50 Share the Plate recipient for July and August is the Chippewa Valley LGBTQ+ Center. You can donate online or text to give 84321. Or checks can be mailed to the UUC at 421 South Farwell in Eau Claire, 54701. With gratitude for the abundance in our lives, we give to help people in need and to support the work of this congregation. The music today will be a song you have heard earlier this year. It is the choir singing. We thought the perfect song for this Sunday's service, The Road Home.
Thank you, choir, for that beautiful music. And thank you, Tim, for sharing so much of our history. It was helpful for me, and I'm glad that everyone could join today. I extinguish this chalice, this flame, but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words today are by Marianne Hachten Cotter, the first minister of this congregation. May this ending be our beginning. Let us begin again and again to wonder and to cherish and to act, so that at day's end we will be content, knowing we have given our all to life. Dawn is now turning